as crazy as 2020 has been, I can't say I was expecting an RCR 1-2 finish at Texas Motor Speedway of all places. This race turned out to be one of the more unpredictable races of the Cup Series season. Let's talk about the O'Reilly 500 from Texas. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Yes, I'm finally back home, back in my normal studio, my normal setup. It was nice watching today's race from the comfort of my living room couch, my nice reclining sofa. It was really snazzy, really relaxing. I honestly can't say I'm disappointed that I wasn't at Texas Motor Speedway impersonate. It was a fun race. I'll talk about the race here in just a few moments, but my gosh, 95 plus degrees. NBC kept showing the in-car temperatures, 130, 140 degrees on average. They interviewed Brad Keselowski during that red flag. He sounded like he was about to wilt away into nothingness. It was hot out there. There's a reason NASCAR doesn't race at Texas Motor Speedway in the summer, at least not during the day in the summer, but a lot of interesting elements to talk about from today's Texas Motor Speedway race. One of the more unique racetracks on the schedule. I know everyone looks at it and just says, what? It's a 1.5 mile quad oval. There's like 4 of them on the schedule or something like that. But Texas Motor Speedway, because of the reconfiguration a few years ago, because of the repave, because of the current rules package, and actually Goodyear bringing a slightly different tire to this race this year, Texas Motor Speedway races like no other track on the schedule. We're going to talk about today's race. We're going to look at the top finishers, the surprising winner of today's race. We're going to talk a little bit about the points because there are some huge shakeups around the points bubble, the playoff bubble. And then, of course, I'll put this race on the Groovy Gauge at the very end. So a lot to get to. Let's dive right in. Let's just start by talking about the top finishers because that'll kind of allow us to jump off into several different avenues. The class of the field pretty much all day today was Ryan Blaney. He won stage 1, he won stage 2, he was leading and dominating stage 3 until Quinn Houff decided to pit from the second lane in turn 4, caused a huge wreck, and that caused a caution in the middle of green flag pit stops as they were cycling through. That trapped Ryan Blaney as well as Denny Hamlin, who was probably the second best car all day, trapped the two of them a lap down, and that's really what set up the final sequence of restarts and really changed the complexion of this race, which is why you'll notice Denny Hamlin is nowhere to be seen here, and you'll notice Ryan Blaney is not at the front as he probably should have been and was most of the day. Let's talk about the Richard Childress Racing 1-2 finish here at Texas Motor Speedway. Austin Dillon gets the win. It's his third career Cup Series win, his first since the Daytona 500 all the way back in 2018. It's been 2.5 years since the 3-car found victory lane in the NASCAR Cup Series. It's only, I believe, the second career top 10 at Texas for Austin Dillon. Now, they did it with tire strategy. Texas Motor Speedway, like I mentioned at the top of the show, was reconfigured and repaved, most importantly, after the 2016 season, before the 2017 season. This is the 4th year now of the repave. And as is typical with most big track repaves like this, tire wear is not super noticeable at Texas Motor Speedway. But it felt like today, maybe this is due to the tire Goodyear brought. Like I said, they brought a slightly different tire for this race. Tire wear was virtually non-existent. These Goodyears were literally immortal during today's race. There was virtually no wear whatsoever. 50 laps under run, 100 laps under run. You saw left tire only changes in this race. You saw a ton of 2-tire, plenty of 0-tire calls in this race. That's ultimately what allowed Tyler Reddick to get up to the front row and allowed him to finish second. He took no tires on the last set of stops. Austin Dillon took 2 tires the last time everybody came to pit road, which allowed him to restart on the front row. He was already running up inside the top 10, which is what allowed him to make that jump into the jump in track position. And that was really the deciding moment of this race. Many of those other drivers you see there in the top 10 ended up taking 4 tires and lost valuable track position. And given that the final few runs of this race were really short, there are a lot of cautions, a lot of restarts, a lot of quick runs, it really didn't give anyone time to, for the tires to come in, which wasn't really a thing all day, but what little bit of tire wear did matter, never really had a chance for it to come in because with all the restarts, all the cycles on tires, by the end of this race, Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon were basically on equal tires at that point. There wasn't that big of an advantage anymore for Busch. So it was kind of a perfect storm for Austin Dillon, but it was not easy because he had to hold off his teammate Tyler Reddick. And actually on the initial restart after the pit stops, he actually had to beat Tyler Reddick, who had the preferred line, who was the control car, but maybe those extra tires, the experience perhaps, Austin Dillon was able to get by his teammate. Good battle on those last couple of restarts. Good battle between the two drivers. I really thought Kyle Busch and or Joey Logano had the better car and was going to be able to get up and race with them, but the two of those drivers were consistently side by side battling for third, slowing each other down, so that really allowed Dillon and Reddick to kind of run off with this thing on every single restart. So congrats to Austin Dillon. Like I said, this is huge, and we'll talk about this in a moment because this completely changes the complexion of the playoff bubble. Richard Childress Racing, as I've talked about this year, has taken a clear step forward. Last year, 2019, was a huge disappointment for Richard Childress Racing. Both their drivers, Austin Dillon, and last year it was Daniel Hemrick, finished outside the top 20 in points. Hemrick technically was Rookie of the Year, but he didn't have any competition. This year, bringing two-time Xfinity Series champion Tyler Reddick into the mix, a second year with this rules package, Richard Childress Racing looks like a completely different team. They've gone from running 25th most weeks to 15th. That's like a 10-point swing. Coming into this race, both Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick were right there on that playoff bubble, kind of teetering on the edge. Some weeks Dillon was in, some weeks he's not. Reddick right there hovering around Jimmy Johnson, Eric Jones, big teams, big names. These two drivers have hung right with them all year and have been contending for playoff spots basically since the beginning of the year. The RCR cars have clearly been faster here in 2020, and it's not entirely shocking to see Austin Dillon get a win at, a non-super speedway. Or, he won in 2017, but it was a fuel mileage race in the Coke 600. Like, he earned this win. Obviously, pit strategy came into play, and that's what got him the track position, but he had a top 10 car. And honestly, his crew chief just made the right call. I'm shocked more teams didn't go with no tires or 2 tires at the end there because, like I said, tires were immortal, and it was pretty clear, even to the average fan sitting on his couch, that tire wear did not matter. But my point is, while this does blow up the playoff grid a little bit or change things a little bit, I can't say Austin Dillon does not deserve a playoff spot. I'm still not a big fan of the winning you're in when it comes to making the playoffs under this current format, but I can't say that, unlike last week with Cole Custer, who was like 24th in points, winning a race and locking himself in, it's not quite the same thing here with Austin Dillon. He was a driver that very likely might have pointed his way into the playoffs the way they'd been running. Getting this win, great for that team that it locks them in. They can rest easy, breathe easy now for the next few weeks. The first time in years they've been able to kind of feel confident, you could say. I'm happy for Austin Dillon. I was rooting for Tyler Reddick at the end because I really like Tyler Reddick, and it would have been really fun to see 2 rookie winners in 2 weeks, or in 1 week really. That would have been pretty freaking awesome, but congrats to Richard Childress Racing. Good to see a smaller team that took a huge step backwards last year take a massive step forward here in 2020, and this win, really the icing on the cake. Obviously the icing on the cake would be getting both their cars in the playoffs, or maybe making a round of 12 or maybe a round of 8 run. That would be the real icing on the cake, but baby steps. And this win to 1-2 finish here at Texas is phenomenal for RCR. So congrats to Austin Dillon. Congrats to Tyler Reddick with a strong finish. Let's talk about some of the other most notable finishers. We'll talk about some of the drivers not on this list who had bad days, you might say. Solid day for Eric Jones, finishing 6th. He needed a solid day. He came into this race, I believe, 42 points outside the playoffs. He cut that deficit almost in half with a good top 10 today. So important race for Eric Jones. Ryan Blaney. Is Ryan Blaney ever going to win one of these races? I mean, Ryan Blaney has 4 career wins, but you could argue 3 of them have been kind of right place, right time, sort of falling into it type of wins. He's got 2 super speedway wins. He won the Roval in 2018 when the 2 leaders crashed in front of him. Like, he's been handed some wins before. He's been so dominant on so many mile-and-a-half intermediate tracks this year and hasn't been able to get the job done, usually due to bad luck. And in this case, it was a caution coming out in the middle of green flag stops, trapping him a lap down with only like 28 laps to go. Not enough time to make up all that track position at this racetrack. You could argue that maybe they shot themselves in the foot just a little bit because he did go with 4 tires for one, and also he was the second lead lap car to pit during the last cycle of green flag pit stops. Usually the leader of the race, especially in this case, Blaney had a couple of seconds, like 3 seconds on Denny Hamlin. Usually the leader of the race waits and is one of the last cars to make their final green flag pit stop. The fact that Blaney was one of the first, like I said, I think he was the second lead lap car to pit, seemed a little weird to me, seemed a little off, especially given the fact that tire wear and lap times were not changing. So you could say they shot themselves in the foot with that seemingly questionable call, but ultimately it was bad luck that Quinn Half just lost his head and just decided to pit while he was in the middle of 3 wide. I don't know what he was thinking. It was a bonehead move. You could say. I can't believe they took Landon Castle out of that seat. Anyway, so a really bad break there for Ryan Blaney. The other dominant car, Denny Hamlin, not on this though. Or no, actually no, there he is. He's in 20th. Oh, I forgot. He actually got a top 20. I thought he finished outside the top 20. Well, Denny Hamlin had probably the second best car all day long, but he was also trapped a lap down in that same caution that Ryan Blaney got stuck under. But while Blaney was able to kind of make up some spots, Hamlin, I mean, he got loose and took out, I think it was it Ty Dillon? Who'd he wreck into? Shoot, I don't remember, but Denny Hamlin got loose, wiped out, took another car with him, didn't get any damage, any significant damage, came back out on the track, still racing for position inside the top 15, got loose racing around Chase Elliott. Looked like Elliott got some air under his left rear, guys, air on it, took the air off his spoiler. Hamlin might have come down, and no contact was made, kind of just a racing deal. Texas, these cars are still on edge. I know there's a lot of downforce, but Texas is a slick track. It's an unpredictable track. These cars are not easy to drive at Texas, so that sent Denny Hamlin around. Again, no real damage to the car, but hurt his track position. So Denny Hamlin went from hero, because it looked like, if pit stops had cycled through, it looked like he might have held on for the race win because of the strategy he pulled over Blaney to take 2 tires, whereas Blaney took 4. He had the track position on. It looked like he was going to win this race if everything went clean and green. He went from hero to 0 very, very quick. Kind of the story of Denny Hamlin's career, is it not? I mean, in this case, it was kind of bad luck that started it, but man, when the pressure's on, when things don't go right for Hamlin, things spiral out of control very quickly. That's kind of the story of his whole career. Still, another day with a really fast car for Denny Hamlin, so worth noting there. Another driver who actually bounced back pretty significantly was Jimmie Johnson. Early on in this race, Jimmie Johnson seemed to have a really fast car. Started pretty deep in the field, drove his way quickly up into the top 10, actually had a penalty which caused him to go back to the rear of the field. He drove his way up through the field once again before ultimately getting loose. Something happened, slapped the outside wall in turn 4. Jimmie Johnson, again, a fast race car, completely torn up. And at some point though, the 48 team can't afford any more of these. They're near the playoff bubble, and with Austin Dillon winning today, they're on the playoff bubble. Jimmie Johnson right now is the 16th place driver in the NASCAR standings with a very slim lead over 17. And in fact, if I do look at the playoff standings right here with Austin Dillon, Cole Custer locked in, Jimmie Johnson is +2 over his teammate William Byron, with Tyler Reddick, who almost won today's race, only 14 points back, and a Gibbs car, Eric Jones, 24 points back. Jimmie Johnson is on the bubble. He is on the hot seat. And overall, as you can see there, this is a really bad day for Team Hendrick, with William Byron getting damaged, getting caught up in a wreck earlier. That was the one Ty Dillon was involved with. Or maybe he was involved with both. I don't remember. Ty Dillon got loose and got into William Byron, caused the 24 cars day to be done. So bad luck for William Byron. Jimmie Johnson getting loose. I mean, how many times this year has Jimmie Johnson wrecked with a really fast race car? I mean, I felt good about today. He's had a lot of success at Texas in his career. I really felt good. I thought today might be the best day we've had in a while to see the 48 car contend for the win. He just took himself out. He just took himself out. I just don't have confidence in that 48 team anymore to get the job done. I really don't. But that team scrapped, that team clawed. They stayed on the racetrack, and with all the other big wrecks, I haven't even mentioned the big one that happened in stage 3 that actually caused the race to be red flagged for about 20 minutes, with Truex hitting the outside wall really hard. You know, with all those cars getting torn up, with all these other issues, all these late race cautions, Jimmie Johnson actually ended up with a top 30 finish in this race, made up some important points. That playoff grid could have looked a whole lot worse, but the 48 team stuck with it, so credit to them. Gritty performance to get max as many points as possible and keep their names inside the top 16 for at least another week. But man, we're down to crunch time here, and the 48 team is not showing the positive momentum that we were hoping for. Anyway, there you have it. Those are the top 20 finishers. Once again, congratulations to Austin Dillon. Big win for that Chevy team. I must say, it was pretty cool, mainly because I love the paint scheme he's been running, this orange and black scheme. I love that scheme, but it looked pretty cool to see the 3-car doing burnouts, you know, burning it down at Texas Motor Speedway. Something about that just looked really cool because we've really never seen it. Anyway, I've talked about the race a lot already, but I haven't really given you guys my thoughts on the race itself. Texas Motor Speedway, fair enough, has earned quite a bad reputation the last several years. Texas Motor Speedway, it's another mile-and-a-half kind of generic cookie-cutter-like track. Like I said earlier, there's a couple other tracks on the schedule that, from like the aerial view, look exactly the same. Atlanta, Charlotte look exactly the same. Tracks like Vegas, Chicagoland, Kansas, Kentucky, oh my god, I could keep going. They all look similar. The banking is pretty close in all those tracks. You know, Texas Motor Speedway was built in the late 90s in the middle of kind of a run where NASCAR was expanding and building a lot of these huge mile-and-a-half racetracks that could seat hundreds of thousands of fans. And Texas Motor Speedway was built during that time, and it's a time that many fans look back at now and say, ooh, wish we hadn't built so many of the same track. Texas Motor Speedway at the end of 2016 tried to set itself apart by repaving the track for one after rain delay and weeping issues in 2016, but then also reconfiguring the track so that turns 1 and 2 were wider and flatter than 3 and 4, so it was 2 completely different corners. Sides of the track were different and unique. No other mile-and-a-half on the schedule quite like Texas Motor Speedway. It was a good idea. It was a good thought. The idea of trying to appear different, unique. I can't say I fault them for trying, but when they said they were going to be widening turns 1, 2, but also flattening it, I don't think anybody was really that excited about those changes specifically. And since this configuration of the track debuted in 2017, I can't say there's really been any straight up good Texas Motor Speedway races. In 2018, I think the spring race, I was there. I remember thinking that race was okay, better than I expected, but really, there's been some awful races. 2018 fall race that Harvick won and then got disqualified for, that was an awful race. That was one of the worst races I remember in recent memory. Last year, even with this rules package, races weren't that exciting, weren't that memorable. This year, once again, the high downforce, low horsepower rules package. I didn't have super high expectations coming in, but I'm happy to say Granted, it's a small sample size, and granted, the competition was extremely weak. This here, today, was the best race at Texas Motor Speedway, the best Cup Series race, I should say, at Texas Motor Speedway since the reconfiguration, without a doubt. And I'm trying to think back to 2016, 2015. I mean, Texas Motor Speedway hasn't had like a great race. People argue the 2014 fall race was a great race because it had the controversy and the fight between Keselowski and Jeff Gordon at the end. 2012 between Keselowski and Johnson was a great finish, but really it's hard to look back at any Texas Motor Speedway race, quite honestly, and say that it was just from start to finish a fantastic race. But today's race, the ending, sure, got a little sloppy, got a little chaotic, got a little unpredictable, but I would say today's race, even with no tire wear, even with that weird detail thrown in there, I think today's race was about as good as current Texas Motor Speedway can be. And overall, not even for a Texas race, I think just in general, compared to any other NASCAR race, today was an objectively good NASCAR race. It was entertaining, featured twists and turns. You can't say that the driver who won the race didn't earn it. Austin Dillon had good speed, was up in and around the top 10 all day long. His team, every team had the option to go with no tires or 2 tires there, and Austin Dillon teams was the team that made the call. Well, Reddick's team did as well. It paid off for him as well. At the end of the day, just blame, look at all the crew chiefs. Look at all the Adam Stevens, the Todd Gordons, the Paul Wolfs, the Chris Gales, the Rodney Childers, these really good crew chiefs that we talk about all the time. Any one of them could have pulled the trigger and said no tires, 2 tires, and likely restarted in the top 2 or 3 and might have had a shot to win. But they didn't. Austin Dillon's team did, and the driver earned it on those final few restarts. Spun the tires a little bit on that one, but made it work anyway. So credit to Austin Dillon. You can't say he didn't earn this win. It was a good race. It was an objectively good NASCAR race, even though it didn't feel like your conventional NASCAR race. It didn't have many of the aspects that you're used to seeing. You're used to talking about tire wear. You're used to talking about those types of things. Didn't talk about that much at all today. So it was a weird race. It was a very hot race, but it was a good race. That's my verdict. Putting this thing on the Groovy gauge, I'm giving the O'Reilly 500, the first race at Texas Motor Speedway this year. This was the race that was originally scheduled for, I believe, the end of March. They moved it here to July. I'm going to give today's race a 75% on the Groovy gauge. I mean, it was a good race. I'm not even going to say like, oh, a pretty good race or a pretty decent race. It was a good race, not a great race, not going to, be talked about for years to come or anything like that. But it was a good NASCAR race, one that, well, long, 500 miles at Texas with the little red flag in there. It was nearly 4 hours long. It was like 4 hours long. It was long, a little longer than I think the modern NASCAR race should strive to be. It was still an entertaining race, and it had me on the edge of my seat, or at the very least, interested and intrigued up until the white flag lap, up until the very end, like from start to finish. So credit to Texas Motor Speedway with the grip strip, the PJ1. The outside lane was fast. The inside lane came in early on, and you could actually make passes later in the race. The bottom lane was actually usable pretty early on in the race, and that really helped the racing quite a bit. The first run was not great, but once the bottom started to come in, very good. Overall, there's not a lot of bad things I can say about this race. Texas Motor Speedway is far from the perfect racetrack, and the fact that it takes a wacky aero package that's never really been seen in NASCAR before, it takes the PJ1 and the whole outside lane, the fact that it takes all these added elements, added details to make a watchable race at Texas Motor Speedway, it's not a glowing review of the track itself. Texas Motor Speedway still has issues, but hopefully the pavement starts to wear out at some point. NASCAR, of course, with the next-gen car here in a couple of years, is going to bring a completely different handling race car, a style of racing to the track. I think Texas Motor Speedway still has a place on the NASCAR schedule going forward. Will it still have 2 dates beyond this year? Remains to be seen. But Texas Motor Speedway is certainly not going anywhere as far as its existence on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. I might have a video up on that here in a couple of days, trying to time it out for the week of Texas Motor Speedway. But that's my verdict of today's race. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. That's all I've got for today's episode. Thank you all for watching at home. Subscribe if you are new. We talk about racing pretty much every day on this channel. I'm back home, so expect more regular uploads here over the next few weeks. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. If you missed it, a few days ago, I posted my Bristol All-Star Race experience video, what it's like going to a NASCAR race during a pandemic. If you missed that video, definitely go check it out. It's thanks to these amazing Patreon supporters that I was able to go to that race, document it for you guys, and I know they had fans in the stands at Texas today. NASCAR is hoping to get some fans in the stands down the stretch. Maybe give you guys a little bit of insight as to what you can expect going to a NASCAR race during these unprecedented times. Thank you all, as always, for the support. Thank you all for watching. I'll be back very soon with some more uploads. Thank you for watching. Take care, you guys. Have a great rest of your weekend.